Yeshe Thabkhe.
Good
morning, Katrina. Thank you for translating for us. And welcome to people online. Motivational prayers. The link is in the chat box.
To the teacher and Tao, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, for destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, nor of the supreme God beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha and Tao, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When I am supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, with emotion like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best supreme guide to I bow. With the supreme size, face like the spotless moon, color like gold to I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one to I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean to the Tathagata I bow. True purity, freeing from attachment, true virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path, the freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame on a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the full faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Iram gururam namandalakam niriyatayami. I take refuge until I awaken in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Again, Dixon.
Oh, yeah. No, it's standing. Oh, yeah, George Patten Adisha Sole. Oh, Chenny Yun Tong, she's a number months. She's taking, she's a meshibes. Nambe Chula, Oma Lembater, Rangan Deva Town to Launch House. Oh, she's some better. Chene yuwen tongsi, tanga razu chede yuwen rumbu shivu te, yuwen na ko jangye de mangbu shivu chi yuwa tsangma changshi wara, jang goya jang ra goya shi ra. Yuwen na ko chede tende rumbu te yuwa ma ra. Di me du chene yuwen tongsi, shi che namba de pe, mangbu namra mangbu yuwa ra, shen goya mangbu yuwa ra. Jidang rinne mangbu yuwa ra, pe chende si cha shawi na, shen goya shung kya chimbo. Pe bari chiwe ne ko pege. Ganyu pe kya laos che, ten yun dreba te nip ya laos che, ganga pe chik tanda tanda che yin rimu ten er jine de sangman sa chi loku samsa ten yora, pe me se yabu yora. Ya hi ne ko, tinte tisi yo marwa mambo. Che ni yun tong, shi che namba maang se, che ja chi zama yun tong tong re de tiya kaze te ro yin, tong tong kaze bo te ro tiya ten de yo marwa. Sanyi nanji dronge ina tende yo maru ya tos tenge ina tende yo maru. Yati di tse jan chisam mishe besi. Ngangbe chula oma lemba tarsi. Pe chagdwa. Ngangba tazu chuta oma ni tre shana ko oma de tagda tong chuti shasha visara. Ngarazu ina kaka cheto umaru, chuti nyamdo tong umada kaka che umaru. Ngangba ko yang tongda keba che kante ina kanga. Oma de tong chuti shasha visara. Soso kuya de le. Chuti tanda kuya ke omara. Kaku mena. Oma de tong shagara. Otina shingarazo shiche nambrado mabu changyu yorte yina tada gogo chere de soso tanda tanda kar kuya de. Ti changa ke chimbure sungora. Pena ngarazo tanda ngarazo tabu yina. Tamune topa kebar che kete nga tindake marwa. Ti medisa ko tanda tanda kuya de. Che deli ya. Kyo chima penche le penye tanda yabu tuku yora. Ngondi chete kechi re dwa. Kyo chima de nga song mandwa che. Lada mili kye de kechi re dwa. O ti indi zang ngondi chechi la sawa. Tesu tanda kechi mbure de dwa. O ti chila na mandwa so. Ya.
So here, as the Pandita Atisha has said, this life is short and there are so many things to know. We also don't know the length of our life. So like a swan extracting milk from water, we should take up our desired aims, take up that which is beneficial. So here we have this kind of life that, although we might think we are going to remain a long time, it is something that is quite short, right? We don't have an infinite amount of time. And that being the case, we can also look at, well, there are so many things that we can know, we can learn, right? Different topics in different sciences. Even if we look at like the Buddhist texts, they're so extensive. Like there are over 100 volumes of the Kangyur and 200 volumes of the Tengyur. Maybe if we had a really long life, we could put ourselves to reading and learning all of that. But it is the case that there's no certainty in terms of how long we will live. We could not make it till tomorrow or the next day. We could soon be gone. And so here we should be like a kind of swan that is able to, it said, extract milk from water. Like they have a special way of drinking somehow that they are able to leave behind the water if they're not thirsty and just get the kind of essence of that milk. And so although there are so many things that we can learn, that we can know, we should focus on extracting that which is most meaningful, most purposeful for us, and really what is most important. I mean, for us as ordinary beings without any sort of high special realizations, we really need to focus on those things that are beneficial for our future life, making sure that we are able to get a good rebirth in the future, avoid falling into the lower realms. So in particular, like the 16 dharmas for achieving a higher rebirth, that which is really beneficial to us in order to be able to ensure we can have such a birth, that is the kind of dharma that we need to focus on, what is most beneficial or most meaningful.
Oh yeah, what do you do, Kasura? Oh, Tandarang Lukuete. Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe to Kiwachima. Tanda Nashin Kichi Tanjo Mili Kebashi Chuda. Jaya Kawa Yunge. Tandale Haxi Yayaki. Rawachi Kueti Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe. Oh, teach ina, teaching cable the Johnsona, and it gave Delia Tarvada Tamje Kimber, 주식이 박사 양내 양도샤 교치마 교환의 교와야 균마치 바셔야 다르바도 탐지치 못없이기 그투술에 배도 강가 용거라 뒤인데 단단한 거라서 민주스 내 송기 동을 내반주네 로미 때와 치마미 하다미 때와 톰도 이제 뒤톱식이 주미기 주부 주림을 써버텨서로 전에 대해서 많이 봐 다르바도에 쳐도 동반이다 공동아 연념을 써버텨서 강가대 강투도 그니 못해 요르 땅에 여섬 랑그 탑시시네 강가 요르 요른도네 녀모만 드림도 개외초게 저와디아 페르페르 도야 여섬 딘도에 맹게르시네 제게 오마로 남주내시 랑자 샤샤오르마도 제게 오마로 어디 인데서고 미게와게 코에 좀 미게와도 가져있는 요르 땅나 요르 땅에 여섬 네버 총으로 쳤다 뒤에도 저 겨어디야 페르스는 페르다 소소 뛰어라 네버 요라 되잖아 타르바 전주스 가서래 메다바다 쇼 메다바다로 아니 동반이라 써봐 대소래 삼을 다 박샤샤 오야 디나시티 랑 타르바 토베시도 라치부서 많이 봐 심지어 탐지가 된다 세대 파말에 써봐 년대 저에 랑다 찍봐 코코테 요래섬 탐매방 여정부 진에 코테를 마음발라 주스테고네 빼쪽으로 샤섬 이쪽으로섬 대소연님도 타로시 제고 있는데 네가 연계시랑 제투에 네가 요래 제고 섬사 어디에 심지어 탐지가 되어 툭툭게 산제지 고반 탐지게 라 자주고 심 된다 민중 장심 양다부에 따와 수두션에 되는 데도 예송의 동에 내봐 주네 탐지게네 라 나다 미 때와래야 코 레다 냠뭐 라와메바 텔레 탐지게 라지 부심 타도 많이 봤으면 탐지게 타고 치고 심 심슈께네 라견 곳에 연대 군대니 가서 유래가 네봐요라 네봐 여산 코템데지 주와 자위 인삼 뒤지까지 공망고 남나 다른 남사 호업대 걸레 줘야게 요 말아 단단히 박샤샤티 줘라 오야 질람는 마음자서 오야
So now, what is really most important, most purposeful for us is to gain a good rebirth in the future, to ensure that we have this special kind of human rebirth wherein we meet with the Dharma. And so, laying down the kind of, if we get skilled in that, skilled in creating the causes for a good rebirth, then we can begin to lay down as well the imprints for those higher goals of liberation and gaining the state of omniscience. But first, we need a kind of renunciation, a renunciation of the lower realms in the sense of taking up the practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, such to ensure that we are not born in the lower realms. And so here, when we think about the kind of trainings for the being of small scope, we need to have that foundation of ethical conduct to ensure that we are able to continue to practice. And so for the sake of liberation as well, we begin to contemplate the kind of emptiness and looking at the faults of our various afflictions, what it is that cause us to cycle within samsara, and try to reduce those, to eliminate them and get rid of them. And this isn't just theoretical. We can't just sort of learn this as information and just remain as we are, but really it needs to be transformational. It needs to be something that makes a change in how we are able to, or how we act in this world. And so we have the ability to reduce the causes of bad rebirths. We can give up non-virtuous actions more and more, increasingly diminishing those kinds of causes. And so too, we can increase our virtues more and more and more. We have that sort of potential. It is right within our own hands. And on the basis of really practicing that well, if we then begin to think about impermanence, think about emptiness and so forth, we recognize that we want to get out of this cycle of taking rebirth uncontrollably altogether. and create those kinds of imprints for gaining liberation. But then when we think about it, it's not just us who is in this situation of suffering within samsara, but all of our mother and father sentient beings, those who have acted towards us with great kindness, are just like us. They are continually cycling through this suffering samsara, and we should be concerned with their welfare as well. And so thinking that I need to not just liberate myself, but all of these other sentient beings who are in a similar predicament, we should strive to be able to actualize our potential. We all have the ability, like we have the ability to become a fully enlightened Buddha. It's managing to actually put our efforts towards that. So if we were to be able to become a being who is able to work for the welfare of all sentient beings, who has eliminated all faults, developed all good qualities, we could then really be of help to them. So here we can see this encapsulates the kind of attitude of renunciation. First, renunciation of the lower realms by eliminating their causes, and then renunciation towards all of samsara, which involves developing the view, the understanding of emptiness that allows one to get out of that. And then there is this attitude of bodhicitta, this wish to not just get oneself out of that cycle of uncontrollable rebirth, but rather to get all sentient beings out of that as well, bring them to the state of liberation. So here we should recognize that we have the potential to do this. We are able to eventually become a fully enlightened Buddha. However, this is not something that is instant. It takes a long period of time. It takes a lot of development, but we also shouldn't sort of diminish ourselves thinking that we don't have that ability. We do have the ability to become a fully enlightened Buddha if we progress in that direction.
No, yeah. No, the Hindu Kasura. Tubadi Tangyard of the Kachambu Chebetana, Jinadoko, Longi Tamba Jinguari Awadwa. Tubata, Sosu Tur Milisha, Tubati, Kachamburi, Longi Tamba Jinguara. Longi Tamba Sayatiko, Sanjay Sungshavatipa, Chevata, Yambati ora. The Longi Tamba Jingur, Longi Tamba de Mazina, Yamumana, and the Tonga Tamba Teleton Yamsalanti Ungumarwa, Yamlisha Ungumardo. Or the Hindu Kasura. Gang Tubadi. Tubadi Kachada, so Tubakan go Kona and Madibri Sunguda. Tubada, Sambada, Gombas, and Nambalia. I think Sakasha, oh, Chi, cigarette, number, cigarette, Hindu, cigarette, Janki, cigarette, Samado, Soso, Yamlishin, members of the Yashi, Yunguara. So, Timana go to Desirako, Tikarilabnella, Keshida, Medo, Konsukarabnella, and Zushida Kebaka Omara. Yine kote töba sene soso samlutan soso semle ya ti yawa kanga lechen yuwa dweru tos kuyara. Ti mene kote töba janjagi labshani tebde go chushan taas taashana digra soso semle ya keba ken dogo mena. Ti tesam ki penta shog marwa ti edu karsura. O töba janjang membache samlutan ti rilam de kugdwa. Megi chi shes na ale ti imresta kochi. Tati tenda yingu be kyuchen de gare sam soso samlutang gora. Samba se de tera soso yindang yinlu de rang shen go yara. Samba se ne riglam de samlutang che. Ti yingu e kyuchen de re tili kyuchen de do de re samsa riglam gi to ne shen ba che gora. O ti abu shen so de yana yang kumji che komba che yong go yara. O ti chong ina ne che chong ga ba song do long chi ware. Karsa Ringlam Tramu Jebe Namjo Tase. Rigbe Lam Tege Netu Tramu Sangma de Yakuji Jetaway Jora, Ringlam says to Wangan Pechanalia. Tina T. Yungube Chusenkare, Mangube Chusenkare, Tajashi Ora, Hakoyachi Orwa. Taras Michi Kumakuya Misha Chichen, Hatan Magunge Koramadu Suji Hamagunge China. Tasu said Hamago. Yine takja chine ne koti kare kola kawa sudo mega sudo chi che paje chide timje bache je kanga ha kondu do musu tonga ne cha ko do te ko reglam je ra jide ge ko che ge nam ju che le ni she tu gyo ra o te ne she che pe je ten da te yin gwe ten da kare me gwe ten da kare samlu ta ne regbe lam ge to ne ko ya wu chi Shen tuwe yora, te soza sozo samutane shen yesi yora. Chiklam tamu jibe namju tangasi. Yo, ene shunglu tambara shawe nyamle se. Tela tene shungu dego, oh, te yabudwa, te mesenale yabudwa, samutanda yabudwa samsa. Susu nyamle chiyasi kogo yora. Te yabudu nga chigisa, oh, te yabudu ngone samsa chikohara mado. Te mena ene tanda kayo mara. Shunglu tambara shawe nyamle tangsuda. Ane tsiki chowa se, ta shengere shene tsiki chowa ta igi sumda ta tesu te yabu shenpa te kuwa ra. Sading dina rinjin namsu naa se rinpoche namba sumde te tsiki wara nga zo. Sei dang mui ta tusu de re da re rinpoche jiri te rinpoche ngune te tiri se wara. Zamlin dila nechi ngune shenge rikbe lamga chi duu se wara, shiklam tene. Ngune kare yinma yin, hako tuwe si wara. Shiklam tamu jibe namche se wara. Tā tī nāshī shīmba nāshī wā tī ngōne rē duwa sam sōsō lé tsōwa jī lébē duwa tī ngōne rē shā sam tīndē chūng yāgu duwa sam sā shūng lū tī sō shē tī sōsō tam ngā lé chā nē tī yāgu duwa sam sā sōsō kāshē kāshē lāng kāshē kāshē tōru shē chī yōgu duwa tī pēn pēn dō rā mā tō tī lab gyō rē sī nē lab nē kā rō tē mī duwa sōsō lé yā chī tsōwa jī lé kū rwa shunglu tambar shawe nyamle tangase nyamle chene mi simgyu tibu che rawa shenda mendra chigi mi bambu le samlo tang tunge sosu dewar so tunge mechi delia sosu nangmi nanda chizo randa nyamdo dodi chinge ina dewar so tunge pe tina shi nyamle de tosi chebe ina ya ali shenda pashasini tsawa bamba kyang chebe ina digidwa yabu chebe ina mechi chine kadigane chine Niri mesi na kandi kewa saya yora. O tindi kasura. O tati sumbude, tingi bude kesimbudo ya ati shishana. Mandoja ya.
So, therefore, hearing, learning extensively, and then being able to sort of explain that to others is what we call sort of uphold the teachings of the scriptures. And we need that, right? We need to uphold the kind of teachings or hold on to the teachings of the scriptures and seek out extensive learning. But just that extensive learning is not enough, right? That itself is not sufficient. That's the kind of beginning. If we're able to just say like, oh, the Buddhists say this, the Jains say this, the Hindus say this, that's a kind of superficial level of knowledge. And that really itself is not going to benefit us very much, but rather we need to engage in thinking about these things, really contemplating what it is that we have learned. So here, extensive learning and holding up the kind of tradition of the scriptures is something that is important, but we really need to think about it in a way that it creates a difference, it creates a transformation in our mind. If it's just something that we have as kind of intellectual knowledge that doesn't make a difference in the mind, then that's not really beneficial. So we need to use our logic to think like, this is how it is. This is what it is saying exists or doesn't exist. This is the reason why it is like this and so forth. And so we need to know these things, come to understand them more deeply through our own logical analysis, not just having sort of heard them in a way that we're able maybe to just explain it to others or sort of lay it back out, but rather to have a kind of real conviction about it based upon using our own logic and reasoning in order to establish that for ourselves. And then on that basis, we can engage in the kind of habituation through meditation. So here there is a verse from Je Lama Tsongkhapa. And it talks about how it is that we can use our sort of analysis, using reasoning in order to understand these very subtle points. That is something that we all are able to do. We have that kind of analytical faculty if we employ it, if we engage it. And we can come to an understanding that is based upon using that kind of logic and analysis in order to get to the second step, which is having all of these texts arise as or like personal instructions that based upon our analyzing and seeing, oh, this is how it is, this is how it isn't, this is what it's saying, this is what it's not saying, and then actually have a feeling about that. Oh, this is something that is good, this is beneficial, I'm going to take this up into practice. This is the next step of really seeing what we have learned as not just being something that is a sort of knowledge or information out there, but rather something that is applicable to our own mind. And then based upon that kind of arising of these scriptures as personal instructions, we can use, one needs to have a kind of skill in composition and understanding of grammar and so forth in order to be able to then articulate that to others. But really, these are the like actual sort of jewels or things that are precious. I mean, we usually think about gold and silver and those kinds of jewels as being precious, but really it is our own analytical faculty, our own ability to use logic to understand something and then really come to have a feeling about it. Once we have analyzed and come to a kind of certainty through that analysis using reasonings, then we can see, oh, this is something good. This is something that is beneficial. I'm actually able to use this to tame my own mind. And it is through taming our minds in that way that we create happiness in the present as well as in the future, and not just for ourselves, but also for others around us. Like, even if we just say, have learned that we should abandon harm and really analyze that and take it up into practice, just that very practice of abandoning harm, how much happier are we? How much happier are those around us if we are able to actually implement that in our lives? And so here, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, we need to use our analytical faculties in order to come through logic to understand these various subtleties and then have these arise as instructions, things that we are to put into practice, not just as kind of information.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh, the Luka sort of. Oh, Sheba down Tuba some Mayimba. The Tunda de Samlutan, the social Swazi Legudwa. Oh, the Rotapone. Tilia Pechana Sungudwa. Puram Shin Shin Buchames. The Pechana Sunguara. Pena Puram Pushin Yara Pushin. Purum Gishin de two Legene Pagba Sadena. Namushida Yomara. Pagba de Pashu, Tinalo de Sagana, Namoyara, Pushindila. Ra. Chilo Pagba de Shu, Netil, Tosakamutes, Tingamuki Yomara, Namune, the Nalo de Yora. Tinashi, Shumba de Nashi, Shuni teacher Nashide, Mawa, the Nyabati Sera. Tishi Shumba de Shimawatis. Get a share the Nyadi, Shumba Nashi de Sera. Tati tanda samlutana soso samlichan tanda samlutana ta puram ki pushing nalo rot savatan shidesira. Puram shinshu nyingbu che me chera. Ngawar chebe rone nana du chera. Shimba shebe puram ro shimbu te nying ma re chera. Tishin shimba te nangshide mawa ta nyemba te re chera. Tishin shimba te shi mawa te. Roda pone tela tasimi rosa na shi te tanda samlutan je susu soa nyone te ngone yine karre mena karre samsu soa nyona ene ngone ro poram ge ro de pushin ge ro ngone de nyongu are sera oti inde ja ko she da nye de ko de peke shimbura te mena ne shenge yongu marwa she nye mena shenge kora nyamli shenge yontu marwa peke shi yine te sambi choshi chigyo marese Tile lawa chigi te tonda samlutane, sosi nyamyoli chane tsoa chile tabshi tire sagudo. O tiji labda, yeah.
So here, not just sort of knowing and hearing in a kind of intellectual way, just learning, we really need to have a feeling about these things. We need to interrogate them and investigate them such that we give rise to a feeling. And so there is a verse that talks about how hearing, or like sort of hearing and explaining and speaking on things is sort of like the husk of a sugar cane, right? That has some sweetness to it, but but the real sweetness is inside. The real sweet flavor is like in the internal part of this. And so hearing and explaining are likened to sort of taking the husk of that sugar cane. There's a little bit of sweetness there. You get a little bit of the flavor, but it's not the actual sort of sweetness of the inner part of that. And so the real taste, the actual sort of sweetness comes when one engages in reflection, in contemplation on what one has heard. So as this verse is sort of paraphrasing, it says the husk, hearing and explaining are like the husk of the sugar cane, but to get the real taste of that, you need to contemplate it. So it's not to say that hearing and explaining things are not important. That's extremely important at the beginning for us to be able to get that first kind of knowledge, but we shouldn't be just satisfied with that, but rather with what we have learned, we should try to penetrate into that, get to the real flavor, the real taste of that, wherein we give rise to a kind of understanding that has feeling with it, that has a kind of conviction in it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, didn't it? Oh, dear, Zakasoda. Oh, that and that. Tabai Kasoda. Taking on to Shung nearly Drangsadiba. Oh, Tidu Gasoda. Tabata, Titangalia. Gokona could Tabachis Shung Gachabushida, the Soyas Medua. Mexican Dias Medua. The Khan Tabate. Susu Yamlili Chane. That's what do Chana. Want to let them make over Topjiki. Miki or Chupa, Kewachu to set the door. Tegalia. 타바토에치도 공동아 쟁아 삼사 라오행아 짐바 아니 나이 삼사 만조 콘조서 착당한다 일이 착당한다 된저 녀모 공동아 제 차도 드심 대주 상마데도 대주 일이 몇이나 대야보면 대견이 삼바이네 알레 담부 강가 매 마시는 대견이 삼 테르네 삼도자 코산지 마송아 삼사데 미케와라 미케와 임바 뭐시 겨울에 기야 임바 뭐시네 랑도르 비서 소소 제베이나 대삼제시다 팽이라 어디에 가서라 어디에나시 아니 겨모토스레 아니 심제리가 바다들에 장시 잠배 취지 따서도 미게 심제다나야 지치도 최지도 가고래도 지치도 완전 러시아 대셔 강가 최전의 제도가 망샤 최르시데 줄여요라 마제는 망샤데 디바 장장 교회르시데 삼루타 마시나 자 최세데고 러시아 대셔 강가 미게 심제다나야 장시 잠배 취지다 나라도 미리야 오도 오메리 컨데이나 코멘데 고칠로 가래 코미리 가래 따다면다 면다리 따고라 심지어 탐제 그 대원들 동안에 소송나 시대에서 타니부를 제 때나 다야 요라고 당시 잠배 취지 따서 미리 심지어다 아주 따단 거라네 그 대야옵니다 예를 시 채우라 요 채우라 그 대바상게 소리도 따단 신내네 교화래도 아니 아까wan도나 제수이라지 야도나 강가 제수이라지 해라 심지어 탐제 대화도 대외 주다 내가 주시 쓰기도 하더니 야도는 가고 뭐 내가 그 배야고도 소부 야부도 탕부도 삼사 벤조 야부도 그 소화 강행면도 삼사 제수 일하지는 겨울럽지 부사야도 제수 일하는데 교환하는 로소시다 깔레시다 매바 교환하는 초도 교환이 있음도 미 야구제들 소소 야구제 삼다면 제수 일하잖아 단단단 두고 와라 페시페실이야 교망 저 다다 두고 있어요라 어쨌든 그 도셔 도셔 상말이야 야가지 누나 자와다 mendewa 규제삼 야그 탄다에네 탄다시 되네 삼사 야부도 삼사 삼로 단셔 주네 강가 개월에 줘야 요라 어쨌든 그 만드나네 강가 코도 당가 제된 데심다 시다메다 강가야 손대 소소 슈다르지 따나 하고 에리도가 단단디나 가지고 갑중갑디 소야되죠 정말 소소 남기 초알이 영된 게 뜻이야 되게라 삼로 텐데텐데 코그레 텐데텐데 마탄 텐데텐데 마탄 송고도 어디에도 가서라 소소 집샤르지 당체 단단 가지고 소소야 삼로 단다데 가래도 개와래도 미개와래도 롱마테래도 딱이다 그랬잖아 근데 야르 줘야 누가 이 매제 테서 어디 현스 조스스네. 다가 조주는 이제 잡아서 말아. 야, 뒤질라나.
So, hearing and just sort of hearing and learning in that way, again, is not what we should be satisfied with. Really, as the earlier quote from Atisha said, there are endless objects of knowledge. There are endless things that we can know. But really, if we summarize those things that are most important, we think about knowing the 10 non-virtues, knowing what is virtuous in order to be able to secure a good rebirth as a human or a god. And then recognizing the faults of the afflictions, the faults of our anger, of our pride, of our sense of I, and grasping at I and mine and my side and the other side and so forth. I mean, we have to begin by recognizing that these are faulty, right? We have to see, oh, a non-virtue, this is non-virtuous, this is virtuous, and be able to distinguish between those two. We need to see the faults of this kind of attitude of anger and pride and ego grasping and so forth. That's the beginning, is having that kind of awareness or recognition of those. But then we need to change our ways in terms of how we go through our life, how we are going about our daily life. So as it said, we should come to see, I mean, not just the faults of non-virtuous actions and the faults of our various afflictions, but the way in which we look at other sentient beings. We should look at them with a kind of honesty, openness, and love. And rather than sort of seeing them under the light of our usual kind of afflicted mind, see that they are just like me, and that they want to have happiness and they don't want to suffer. Really, all of those things that we learn are then things that we need to apply in our daily life. We need to recognize what is non-virtuous and then actually abandon it. We need to recognize the faults of our afflictions and actually make an effort to reduce them. We need to recognize the ways in which we see beings sort of and disregard them, and instead try to transform it into a way in which we look at them with this kind of love and recognition that they are just like me. I mean, normally when we walk around in the world, we're making all kinds of distinctions like, oh, that's a person of a different religion or a different race or different than me somehow, rather than having that kind of attitude that sees them all as being sentient beings who want to have happiness and don't want to suffer. And so too, if we know how to do this, we can make all of our sort of interactions and thoughts as we go throughout our day into something virtuous rather than our normal sort of non-virtuous patterns. Like if we are out in the world and we see others doing good or having good things, to be able to rejoice in that is something that doesn't cost us anything to do, right? And we say these things like, oh, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. Well, when we see beings who are happy, who say have a good life or have a good physical body and are able to do a lot or have lots of wealth, we should rejoice in that. We should rejoice in the good that they do and the good that they have. And this is something that is very easy to accumulate karma this way. If we rejoice in the virtuous actions of others, it's said that we ourselves accumulate a similar kind of karma. And so again, if we know how to do it, we can transform everything into our practice of Dharma. We can make our mind entirely virtuous. But this is dependent upon taking those kinds of things that we know and actually using them to apply to ourselves, to sort of correct ourselves, to sort of look at the various faults that we have. Like we've been talking about these 57 faults, and they are things that all of us have in our daily lives, right? But we need to actually recognize them within ourselves, sort of take an accounting of our own behavior, and not just have this sort of abstract knowledge of, oh yeah, that thing's virtuous, that thing's neutral, that thing's non-virtuous, but actually see that within our own mind, apply it to our own mind, and make an effort to get rid of those things which are non-virtuous. See when we are under a faulty kind of an attitude, and transform the way that we look at others. And that's really the practice of Dharma.
야, 다이 뭐지? 다던다 가서라. 전에듯이 랑근데가 당도랑샤 송번나시 당가라도 고야돼. 겨우 치마 페이지 라담비 큐튜브에 땡 개버지 토야. 그러와. 아니 때좀 많이 봐. 라담미 겨와디야 동해지랑 시제인데 텔레 타르바. 코알레 땡도 타르바. 내가 녀모베 샤와도 주네. 기지 제먹고 봐. 풍분동네 제먹고 게 타르바 토바 쉐고 삼사. Tira. When Telela was Simje Tamje, Ranchibu Sang member, Simje Shanlea Sosobe, Robert Chetunge, Roa, never Yosoba Kone Robert Chetunge, Sanje, Yankusha Yendekundi Kasashi Yuachasam. Ninjun Chansim Yanda Betawa, Tene Tombani, Medapa, Tesunganzo Rob the Kanga Haku Yora. Tatiko Yana Yando Comedera. Namsa Koti Tevadaga Namsa, Nime Mubasaranashi, Miticho Kanga Dosha Marwa. As Toma Mebane Miticho de la Comde Yora. Tangzi the Kondo, Dangaja, the Trado, the Dressimba, Joa Toma Mebane, Comba Chishu Tiora, Kunamsa, Nime Mubasavana, she said to it, Yomarwa. In a telecare, but Tavaris de Comdena. Never shown to dry everything until Hako Tokura. Namjuso Kondo Tabashivich, Tavares, Kondo, you miss some of the Seva Kongurangati, Shambu, Samsa, Samutana, Nurun Drade, so Tortugura. What do you do, Casoda? In Juchas Yanda, but our Kangalo, Goarabs and Robs, Tevada, to the Tonis near to that, it and that the Yana and the Samanta. Thank you, Johnson, and the Yana and the Comia. Or teaching. She said, Namsanda, Chichen, Namla Puria Salajues, the Shivichi, Yoya Samlatajimedua. Tunico also similar Juadu, do Samsa, or Tendesi Calicali Juadu Yordo. You can do personality order. She said, the could dream much of a Tarakudo. Yiri Messina Tabaris, the Juma Sheva Comtangus Kuda. Tinico never church and Dura. Nimakashe Shibuchi Kom Usu Jepse Kale Jepsirache, Yatane Yushana Kemana and a Kayomara. Kimacheva Shodese, Tike Shabisuda. Nidi Sajam Metre, Sundu Samjere, Nima racing is a Kalasaya Matambache, Shuk Jepse, or Tati Shibuchi Komgusam Kalejaguare. Nidi Sajam Mete, Nima racing is a Kalasaya Matambache. Kalejaguare, Namsanchi Sosa. Shumatana Kebe Commandos, Yamle Jesar, Namsanda, Tobara Keberson, Namsan Kebachimbucha, Veshabuchi Chagre, Samsan, some Tagio, Marisera. Shumatane, Chu Yamle Jebata, Namsa, Tobara Keberson, Shuchi Tigre, some Tesambio, Marisera. Shumatana Kebe Commandos. Shasum Lozi, Jimmy Yemeches, Shasum Dosasuna, yes, at the Kaleka, Jara, Imakashega, Atene, Yusar and Dusar, Tayomare. Shasum Lozi, Nimasum Dosona, Jesarako, Yemen, Shadalian, Tagitos Kagayomare. Or Tendesa in a Namsa, never turned to Maresha, Tendetela Chiameomas, or Tendesa, Yotekaya, Ketu Maresha. So, but Chui Geshe Yeshe answer. Chui Yunashe Tavares, but you must have a terrace in Dodena. Koyaja Madu and Drea Korayoma, Yajan Dodogara, and I'm teaching Mara. Oh, said Tosto Shania Yushara, Cheshara. So, but Chui Geshe Yeshe answer. Soon do something, Chui Yunashe, you must have a Tavares, they come then. Some Korang, some Yundangi, Rangire. Rangi ringde de shaji kom jana ko cher doade kora rangshi de kondu rai sayna kondu kyushaji samlata de ne kondu cher dora tina shi sebare jine samlata da de ne ko seba cher do rangshi jare yondenge rangshi samji yondente so rangi ringde ngama de kom ne tina shi kom yam ko ne ko yare re tima to tabshi senda ke yo mare me saya yo marwa the Kin to the Comnani, so Yajan Rondocare, Kaja in a Paksha, Shagiora. Oh, Tayabu in some territory in the Comtos, some Susaki, Chess, no, Yabucho, some such. And Tendation, I think the Gavamato Namsa, Kasoda, Mendrado, Shivichi, Chiku Samsa, or Tendese, Toptical, Tovia, some Tanjimado, and the Kasha upside the Chetambu Shivicha. It's a my usual Kagamedusa usual. Or to remember that on the Tobada Samba Combe Rimji June. And he could say you and they could take concession you are awesome. Teach and do it to Kundune, Yamli Juma Sheva Shigin, some teach do 兄弟啊，特别到上把公别人民就为什么公路线的那上把说是，我呀，对这个。
So here, as the verse from Atisha says, like the swan extracting milk from water, we should take up our desired aims, right? And in terms of what we really are aiming for, we can talk about various levels. I mean, at the first hand, we need to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god based upon practicing the correct kind of causes for that. And so ensure that we have a kind of basis to continue to be able to practice. And then looking at samsara as being in the nature of suffering, we see that even if we take rebirth as a human or a god, that's still under the control of this uncontrollable rebirth, right? Due to our karma and afflictions. And so therefore, there's the thought to attain freedom from all of that cycle of suffering, and to do so not just for yourself, but really to strive to be able to benefit others who are in this situation, to become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, and thereby has the ability, the knowledge, the compassion to be able to lead others from that state. So when we think about the like sort of distilled essence, our desired aims can really come in these three: this attitude of renunciation, the correct view, and bodhicitta. So things like thinking about emptiness, seeing the suffering nature of samsara, and really recognizing that all other sentient beings are in this same situation. And so here we should think about these topics and then meditate on them again and again. It's not something where just upon one hearing of this, it's like turning on a light and all of a sudden all the darkness is gone. But rather, we need to recognize that we have been habituated for so long to the kinds of things like grasping at permanence, grasping at a self, our anger, our pride, our hatred, and so forth, that we have to work against that. It's not as though we can just instantaneously, like switching from dark to light, be able to get rid of those kinds of faulty patterns and habits that we have had since beginningless time. So in terms of trying to develop our mind, this is something where we need to really think about it. Think about what we have heard, not just be satisfied with the hearing of that. Think about it, contemplate it, and habituate our minds to it again and again in order to counteract those kinds of long-standing patterns and habits that we have. We can know this from our own example, like our own experience. If we're really angry, say, and we begin to see the faults of that anger, and we begin to see the benefits of patience, then we see how we can slowly reduce that anger and increase our patience, our ability to bear with things. And so here we can expect to do this, but not in a kind of instantaneous way. This takes time. This takes really habituating ourselves to these. So here, if we are able to, by practicing the Dharma, gain another good basis, another good rebirth as a human or a god, we can continue this kinds of practice. But this is something where, again, we shouldn't expect instantaneous results, like all of a sudden we have these kinds of realizations or these magical abilities, like being able to suddenly fly or something. But rather, this change is something that happens slowly over time, and it's really through continuous practice and having that continuity without cutting it, without having like sort of starts and fits, spurts of practice and then giving it up. The continuity is extremely important, and not having a sort of break in that continuity of practice. So here, there's a verse which says something like, if you strive like really hard, like say even giving up food, and you're thinking like, oh, instantly I'm going to become a scholar, I'm going to become an adept, I'm going to have all of these great realizations and qualities. If you are really pushing yourself in that way, or even you stop eating, right? After 3 days, all of that effort, you'll think like, and you don't gain any huge realizations, all of that disappears. You sort of forget about it, or are like, oh, forget about this doesn't really work. And then thinking that nothing has come about from that, you end up giving it all up, right? So rather than being like that, our efforts should be like a flowing river. We should make an effort in a way that is continuous and steady, that isn't in sort of these like intense periods where we think like, oh, I'm going to get this instantly, in a way where we're not even eating or we're not even taking care of our body, but rather we should make an effort on a daily basis. This is the quality of our mind. This is the nature of our mind, that the more we habituate ourselves to something, those causes of a similar type lead to something similar, right? So we have the ability to develop patience if we make an effort, if we habituate our minds to that. We also have the ability to develop anger stronger and stronger if that's what we allow our habits to go to. So we need to recognize that there's no other method than actually working with our mind, creating those kinds of habits in mind. And so if we take up the practices that will guarantee a good rebirth in the future, we can also be putting down imprints for those higher levels of liberation and the state of omniscience. And so on a daily basis, we should be trying to put these things into practice. We can't just like take medicine. We can't just flip a switch. There's no other method other than working with the mind, putting down these imprints, rejoicing when we do something good. If we think that we are going to get an instant change, we are going to be disappointed. And that is something that can cause us to turn away from the Dharma entirely. So thinking that I want to become a fully enlightened Buddha, someone who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And for that purpose, I'm listening to the Dharma with the intent of really contemplating it, thinking about it, and putting it into practice on a daily basis, such that I can strive to be of benefit to all sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm now listening here to this Dharma. That's the kind of attitude that we should have for listening to the teachings.
Oh, 당연히 될래서. 솔로가 되는 심내 신도 마와니 심슈 심숨 임바니도 댄세더라. 근데 ngapchu badara ngapchu nade de ngapchu badembra. Tika sibar. Ah,
Nyesambar di shenla Jesu chakpa she sumbadi.
karishemba. Solo ka sumchu badero ade. Marbe.
Ishitsabdun mendra.
İşte
Nishitsabdin yudra.
Oh ya. Ne çamgaca.
Geshe-la's trying to jump ahead, so we're.
Ne yentong samde gasma çamgaca. İşte o de ingili. Ne de taşı kepşe ta manda şunu saha koyamadı. Ya da hani işte o dedi da. Nesim
Shenla Jesu chakpa.
Ah,
Shenla Jesu chakpa she sumbadi.
Niştepleri şolukan niştepte.
Lare.
De dere. Oh ya, sumba şençes aya tate dode. Ore dere. Kitama de ya tosare. Sumba şençes uzibe. Çakmadan debe namdo. İmba te gebam. Demeşela. Çakmada o dere işte tadare. Tate devşa. Te çene dere şa. Oh ya. Şenci çadan dembayı namdo kanyi şendala çadan se o dirida da tirta bas kepşa tinsere tene karşı dosuna şenci çadan dembayı se şenla cesu çakmadan dembayı se ro namdo kanyi şendala çadan se şendala çakba se ti sigdo tin debadine karşı dosuna sumba şenla cesu çakmadan dembe namdo imba tenese shenla cheso chakwe namdo de panghu do ti karsigra shenda suresna keba ina peme ina keba lya shenja de panghu de songore ti ma jewa chewa de se shenla cheso chakwe dan de be namdo imba ne keba am peme shenda la chakwa da o ti panghu do ya ti chilamna
So here, I believe we're just trying to find exactly where the mark to end was, but we'll be picking up with verse 427. And so here, this is kind of like this is the 43rd in this list of 57, and it's split into two, which is a little bit difficult in the way that it's translated. So I'll just read the whole verse, but it says, conceptuality in connection with infatuation is to dwell on how one might help or hurt others due to being affected by attachment or malice for them. So here, this is referring to the first of these two that come in this verse is referring to conceptuality in connection with infatuation, which is a kind of infatuation. In this case, it's specified as either like for a male or a female, having that kind of attachment to them. We need to give up that kind of attachment that is that comes from conceptuality in connection with our infatuation. That in this case is dwelling on how one might help others. I would say, but this is the first of these two.
다른데 전주 선바 rabdu chungwa mayi batsu le shegi wada. Di chasim pangure sera. Kaya chasim pangure de ina ya ko ngodi kombe wange chende kewe ina. Ya ko nyembo komne mitukpa komba se to shegi wanga zu. Do na chende mitukpa komya yora. Mitukpa komne pe chagwe yutile chagwa mironsam. Chune ta tongpa nida mitakpa de tiri samdana pengira. Tati mena lyugi chashe susu chene. Rwa. Lyugi chashe chagwe yudi lyugi chashe susu chene. Kingri la sokpa tiri samlata tiri songira. Chakpa shiye tontarita. Pacho de tuku imba ta tukja imbe kizike mara. Chashin doye tontalia. Ane lyugi chashe susu chene. Lyugi me zangwa ta tiri mamu samlata yora. 미사회 제 순위 되버려 써봐다 tin데다 리다 르바다 저 카가 치네 기그리스도 꼬미야다 tin데 여기 와라 어디 맞아 야 진데서 나 what did you learn?
So here, this is for bodhisattvas, both who are ordained and not ordained. And here, when we think about getting rid of this kind of infatuation, wherein one, out of attachment to a particular object, feels that kind of infatuation for them, this often entails meditating on the unpleasantness of that object, or thinking about impermanence or emptiness even. But here, when we see descriptions of meditations on the unpleasantness of the object of attachment, in particular when it's the body of another being, there are meditations going through sort of splitting up the various parts of the body, going all the way down to the skeleton, like removing the flesh and so forth, and thinking about the various sort of the parts of the body, and really how disgusting they are when we would sort of take it all apart. Now, this isn't something where it's saying like the other person in this case is bad in some way, but rather by thinking about the kind of unpleasantness of their physical body, like going down to the bones, imagining them as skeletons and so forth, is something that is done in order to remove that kind of attachment. It's not as like a value judgment on the object.
야, 어디 되가. 어디 되고 수수 남도 봐 따가마도 예코랑은 내랑도 그베 예도와다 예도 매와세 텐데요 말아. 수수 샘기 봐. 다셔도 내고 예도와다 매와다 차바다 따유 여기 와라. 어딘데 삼자한테 여기 있으라. 디메나야고 유지 샘리아 다시 가는 까마도 제고 다시야 촬영이나 텔레 좀 맞아. 소소 남주지 삼을 코스노 야 삼을 코스노 디리디리디리 삼다디라. 두자를 콘도라고 시마가 시초스노 삼을 코스노 남사 디갈 소소 겹겨지 삼을 땅기라. 그 두자를 지지 디마스마마 디마스세 삼을 땅기라. 근데 삼을마다 이제 고란 차르치 겹겨 맞아서 요샤니야 근데 기억하르쳐서 샘리하고 soba jange sunde cheche. Tegi samlo konge chora, samlo metewa, moguya samlo korte na, kokoran shasha samlo korchu, entelo ngazo samge semba chigi, temo tange sunde si tego doa. Karchi doa si yusha de, koran koran yedura. Ngaranche samlo chenga tange yora, tiga samlo tang samlo tade ni yora. Ngazo te samlo matane samlo kosana yusha ne, samlo koran temo tange sunde, temo tasa sunde shasha na, koran koran yedura. Takyo chigo mara, kyun tiyo maro, nga zo tinga de nga raja tiyo wara, susu samlo tangi wara wada. O tende che samlo tangi wara, tante wuxe. Ya, tiji sona.
So here, when we have like an object that we see as pleasant, for example, we should recognize that being designated by our conceptuality as being pleasant, it doesn't exist as such from the side of the object. So contemplating in this way, we can get out of the kind of process whereby when we see something as pleasant, and we allow ourselves to sort of give into that, we will have all kinds of thoughts that sort of back that up, that reinforce that idea that, oh, this thing is really pleasant from its own side. Or for example, when we have someone that we don't like, that we're angry with, and we think about them, and then we use all sorts of different thoughts backing that up. Oh yeah, they did this. Oh, I don't like them because of this. And we sort of perpetuate that that affliction. But if we're able to either counteract it through our way of thinking, seeing it as being merely designated by conceptuality, or sort of step back, get out of the process of that anger thinking or that kind of attachment thinking, and observe it like we're sort of watching a movie, then these things naturally disappear. They naturally dissipate. But it is our mind that causes these things to continue on and sort of reinforces them through the thinking that backs up that sort of initial grasping. So if we instead step back from that, sort of use part of the mind to observe itself and see how it isn't the case that this is like in accordance with reality, then we can stop that continuity. We can be kind of block those afflictions that would naturally arise for us, and stop the process of like backing them up with our thinking.
Oh yeah, that's so. Ta nesem tiyo matara. Nesem, nikado. Nesem rekwa ye. Ni penda me pen semba osa. O te kasi do sena. Shibchu shishibate doa. Changanga digunenda shibchu shishibate. Nesem rekwa ne. Ene te penbadambeda. O midreji tusuna. Tege sosolo pendo yobashira mevachira kare tawhira gato. Pendo yobashina o kole chitashitele sa chichesina. Pendo mevachina mi sura chite chitegra. O tende machiv chesiyora. Mi pento matos namsan ngazo tatan koratira. Soso koye de kare do dagira. Te koye kare do te jen te de tumbe cheche milia keche she de kagachegura. Tende members ko chidam michile na kundamsa tende chori soso pento kadlegido dinga zo semba konatira ngal koya kardo se michil tusuna tele tene soso ya kole tene pento le kardo dagiro mato sibe kote de ko pento ke mendo poldo poldo sene jaga ke sireda yanga de tagas peme to mirisa na me yushagra tende chijume se ko chidam mi bate dandere chikbarab che tatang chikbar che tagore sungara. Tinyati meme nezu shanda me yene sosu tira amada. Kambu nine, mi tongza mine. Mige semche tana ya transhi chambe chuji taa si tisi yabu chi tagore. Kambu ne kesan le ya da ko chikchi. Azu tatal kiro ati taji me sungdo. Ya, nesem kaba nesa. Nesem rekwa ye pemba tam me pemba. Semba wasira. Tanto neba kengerishino o tete nge machi chera ko tuksa re sam me pemba tiche kondu saya nyenka yora. O tende chichi meson kuto ya tichilana.
So Next, in this same verse 427, the second half of it, kind of, it then comes the 44th of these 57 faults, which we could say is like having a sort of a malice, or literally like sort of contacting malice. Now, here, this then says, so, being affected by malice for them, we sort of look upon others as though, will they help me or will they hurt me? So here, this is kind of an attitude of maliciousness, but is really focused on when we see others, we immediately look at them as like, well, what can they do for me? Are they going to benefit me, or are they going to harm me? We look at others not in a way where we just see them as human, or we approach them as pleasant. Like if we think that we can get something from somebody, or that they can achieve some of our aims, we'll be nice, say hi, smile at them. If it looks like they're not going to be helpful to us, we sort of disregard them. We just completely ignore them. We don't have this kind of attitude wherein we see all sentient beings as just human, right? It's more as though our normal way is looking at others of like, well, what do I get out of them? What do I need from them? If they're not helpful to us, then we sort of just cast them aside. Or if we don't like the way that they look, we'll sort of think like they're our enemy immediately. And so here, this kind of, and again, conceptuality in connection with, we could say, malice, is this sort of dwelling on how one might help or hurt others, really based upon our own needs, like thinking about, well, what am I going to get out of them? So here, rather than looking at sentient beings like that, the way that we should look at all is equally as like looking at them with honesty, with love, with a kind of integrity, and what could I do for them? Not in the way that we normally do, sort of thinking like, well, what are they going to do for me? What am I going to get out of this person?
Oh, yeah, that's the best. That is the kind of mega temper maybe yes, is the one. Mega se kavu me se. And ye the tempo, the mega ko mega some mambo ko er sinjira. Namjuna se some madem se. Madem se. Mega temper maybe yes. Shipchu shenga ba de to mega se kol kavu me. Temper maybe ye namjuna se. Tata tempo se madem se ko chagda da ko da mambo. Tempo me se sem judura. O tende me se wo de sungara. Megawese. Tatunda mi sutuna ku megawache mero. Megawache na ni sim tempo mese ku tilia shenda samlu mabu ko yongura neva ke ta keche shene keche tukse she ta kanga yongura. O tire to. Ya tiche tato nyokwa. Tiche lamna. O ale tiche lapshana.
So then the next, the 45th, comes in the first line of of 428, wherein it says, erratic displeasure is an unsteady mind. So here, when we see others and sort of have a dislike for them, that makes our mind kind of unstable, unsteady. When we are looking at others and we immediately feel a kind of dislike towards them, and here translated as erratic displeasure, is an unsteady mind. That means that there's no sort of steadiness to our mind, stability.
Oh yeah, tiche la. Tato nyokwe yi no sigdo. Pajo de tato ro che ya me chi ya ra chi tong yi ne. Benjo da yun de da chi tende sine tato che ora. Shibju shidu ban debe nyokwe yi no se tato che ro. Soso la yun de da chi kare na. Benjo da tende chane ku ya ku yo telia tato che che. Tato nyokwa chuban debe 차도 debe se ora rang de shenxia ge wang ge nyokbe yi no se ne sem yo do ra 차도 chi chi ma ra ngone chen nam ju ga ne jesu yi ra se ra shen le ya ka re ne tele jesu yi ra che ora ma do nam ju ga du lo jo chen ge ri chi ne ya ka re ne pho jo de ya ga do na o de ga ko lo jo chen de pe ang ge ya bu le che ba ya bu do asam nga ten de che thom ne ya bu do asam na Jesu iranche kami yata sigre babane Kamiyata, Kadami, Yaga Chingatil Tower, Tuga Chingatil Tajo Marsera, Kami Yago Chingatil Yata Ures, Kami the Wachingatil Mata Gio Marsa Surasira, or the Venyoga Yinosa, Dira, the Venyoga Yinosa, or did die dosa. Tato, Yoga Yinoside, Tado Wagin, Pajo de Semyon, Yamoshe, Sim Samachagmara, Kodunga, Trado, the Kakari Nation, the Kangayangura, Yi Nyo to Gudesivara, Yi Namginesi, Badevice, Yi Tuksura. Oh, teacher, what is Luna?
Mm. So then, 46th, we have next, and here, this translation says, desiring union is a mind that is stained. Now, here, this is, the way Geshe is reading it, it's really out of jealousy or out of envy or sort of desire or clinging to the things that we want. Out of a kind of desire, we feel jealousy towards others, whether it's qualities or things that they have and so forth. And that is really something that dirties, that sullies or stains our mind. When we see a good qualities or others having good things, we should rejoice in that. Like if we're someone who is trying to study and learn, we should look up to those that say get higher marks, that have more learning than us, rather than feeling a kind of jealousy. We should look up to them as being like an example. So there's a kind of Tibetan saying about this, that we shouldn't, we don't want to look down upon others or feel a kind of envy towards them, but rather we should look up to them as being a sort of an aim that we are striving for. When we feel a kind of jealousy toward others and envy, that is something that dirties our mind, that sullies our mind, and we should avoid that kind of jealousy that comes from desire and stains our mind.
Oh, yeah. Tade Kangal Shasora, Lumbayina, the Kimji China, Kimji Pajo, Tromba Pajo, Sujoyina, Chili Yabu Yong, the Kotado, the Garina, Yonsora, Lumbayina, Yonsora, Lumbachili Abuchana, or Koyabu do Digasa, or Konjo Kanda Sudong, Anzo, and the Shagur Sena came into Kamiyata Yabusera, or Koli Abu Drenducha, and Koli Yabu Mana Samgira, Drenducha, my Beshe, Ra. 제수이라체 야야예 도야래 지게실 제수이라체 지드나시 소소 도야 탑시체니 경계요 말아 만저 건전나시 야부 도야체 우리 삼사 티션되어라 저도 지도니 버저데 마 누구 차나 삼기라 라야가 샤 지구데 마마르 세네 삼체셔라 어디 무슨야 뒤질랍나.
So this kind of jealousy can happen on all different kinds of levels. It could be between neighbors or between countries and so forth. And rather than having that sort of jealous attitude wherein you're kind of competitive with another, if you see that others are doing well, like whether it's your neighbors, you should think, oh, that's something that I could strive for. When we have a kind of jealousy or competitiveness, when it is between countries and so forth, there's this desire to sort of like take others down, that you don't appreciate what is good in them, but rather you want to bring them down, rather than having this attitude of thinking, oh, that's good, and we should try to improve ourselves or bring ourselves toward that. When it comes to a kind of attitude of jealousy or competitiveness, there's this often wanting to bring others down, rather than this sense of looking up to them in a way that can cause our own improvement.
Oh yeah, that. Number Jumba maybe a load number Jumba maybe Lu Kulu Tangi Lelo Yesa or Tata Karsido Sena Shipshu Shipin by the Redo Nyomle Nese Nyomle so there's a call Lelo Sierra Lelo Sierra Nyomle Ne Kewala Jumba maybe Kilu Tangi Lelo Yenosa Nyomle Lelo Shanti Sierra que vale so shawa sambu to ko chungi marwa kilu bose kilenya busira ko tawa gore ko te ma to che tendele ko chamba da kawa me ke shora atil siwara chamba nyam yamba ne se te tamade Nyomba Zomba maybe list, Nyomle Sigrisera. The Chundri maybe Kilube Lelo Resera. Kewecha was yet a local Medovasete, young Medusa, Nami Tankashora. Oh, the Tumba Yombane, Kewala Zomba maybe Kilube, Tangilelo Yinosa, Tishilana.
And then the 47th comes in the second half of verse 428, where it says, lassitude is the laziness of one who lacks energy. It comes from being physically listless. So here, this is really kind of lacking in any kind of effort toward virtuous or positive sorts of things. So not this kind of lassitude or sloth is something wherein, or sluggishness, we could say, is a kind of attitude wherein one doesn't one is lazy with respect to having effort in virtue. And that's really the meaning of being sort of lazy or sluggish.
Oh, yeah. Then Jura said, Jura said. Jura kare juresne nyomo ge wange leda kado jura ose o chi mira tu kare na chi tanti mati chungsona ra ane kondu ga je thado ya kare ne nyomo wange sigara jundu des kare jurosne nyomo wange ne leda kado juaso lejin do meda wa te ya ra nga ko ne ke chi damde se namju damde te ya shora o tinde si ju amare sungara jura ten treba tena ka shibju shibja barwa gyuru ane nyomombe wange ne lu da nga ne gyuru awos lunga ge namju meda te namsa wa ko tembo je to tin da sem ma nya je pa seba che wor ma to chen di ma namsa tong ge namju meda te khane ke je meda she te de jo ma re se gara ti ma chen ko sem ne chi sam ba o te di ma re sam shan sem ne sam ba de pa jo ke ne gu ma ro nga lunga ne matumba meko namjudu matumba shawde sarshira ya tishilana.
Then next in the first half of 429 is the 48th of these, which is affect. So affect is the transformation of body and face that occurs through negative mental states. So here, this is really the kind of transformation of both our sort of, like, say we encounter someone and something seems not right to us. And so therefore, we sort of show the aspect of our displeasure. We have the kind of affect that we are upset or that we are angry or that whatever they did was not right. So rather than immediately kind of showing that through our face, our body, our way of speaking even, we should have patience with this. We should have patience with those kinds of situations that seem off, not immediately sort of show our affect or show the kind of control of our afflictive emotions in terms of our physical or verbal affect.
Oh yeah, ta se mendo basa kala sanyi mando bas chitangwa kala sanyi mando te kalsigor se mendo bas satra bas kala manga sa shara shimbu du sabde to be kanga bodo sa shara ane utan e kabuche tiche satra bas se akbalesa se mendo bas changora se mendo bas kalsigor se kala satra ne lu mendo wa imbarshatos sobo dev me bachara manga sa na u ta me do ne sobo nyobo chawra mo tin deba shedu kar shedu sna shiju shiku ba de do sa me de ba ne sa tra be lu me de wa imbarshatos kala sa tra ne ne lu de bu me ba sobo de me bachara se de chara ta te kar se gora sna sobo de me bachara ko te ke mar ka sra panja se ki marwa ti nyeba ke marwa ta skora sobo me de chara se panja ti ke marwa sna ti marwa sra kala satra te kon dengam chetane maga sawi ore chara sobo ya phemba yin sam tata ji sa ko sam ge o marwa o phe shenja chetane maga sa sa ro o tere kala shimbu du ma ta ji sa ko sam ma ta ji sa ja ne sobo me te a cha nya ga yo ra o ti si ore se 시고바 사메데바네 사트베 르메데와이 바세 르메데와샤네 담보데데 꾸일로데 마데라 덩암셔제 고 칼라티 심부츠 망보사고 삼티 마데라 메테제 게고 야네 사트베 르메데와샤네 되게 껴 망보 연구디 땡이제 고미야다 개와체를 껴 연구를 스테방고레세 가시엔디나 연구도 코라시에 가시 제부디 셰베스인데 가시 규디 셰베스인데 연구유세라 다데 규단 제부니가 세서라 이 꿀롱디 자시부지 사고 섬등함 심부시에더라 르메데와 샤발 때는 띵이지 고미야데 테슬 껴지 티방고레세 전다 고두거라 야디스 어디스라네
Mm. So then, next is physical discomfort comes from eating too much food, is physical sluggishness. Here, this actually is listed as like not wanting to eat, and which really is coming from not from eating too much food. So when we eat until we are too full, this has a physical effect, like maybe our breathing becomes more difficult and so forth. The body becomes kind of sluggish and so forth, uncomfortable. And so really this is coming from the incorrect initial motivation, having this kind of greediness of thinking like, ooh, there's this really tasty food, and rather than eating just enough, just what you need, you keep eating more and more out of that kind of desire, that kind of greediness. And so the initial motivation is the problem, right? This physical discomfort and sluggishness that comes about from eating too much food. That eating too much food is really motivated by that kind of greed, that kind of wanting, because you think, oh, this is so tasty. And so that initial motivation is faulty. And then this creates the kinds of conditions that are not good for, say, developing meditative stabilization, when your body is too sort of sluggish or overcome by that kind of physical discomfort from overeating. So here, some of these faults are talked about in a context. I mean, someone might think like, well, what physical discomfort? How is that a fault? But really, it's talking about that initial motivation when you're driven by that kind of greediness, really wanting all of that food, and then overeat. That then, in turn, that cause leads to this result of this kind of physical discomfort and sluggishness, which again are obstacles to being able to develop things like meditative stabilization.
어야 다데레도 샘 신도 마와니 세더라 샘네 신도 마와니 세데 샘 신도 마와세 어떤 데 체메로 하레세로 아카르시 오레세나 샘 신도 마와니 샘숨 샘숨바이 마니도 자스 자와데라 데카시도스나 납슈 바데레도 장가데 샘네 신도 마와니네 샘신도 마와니 시도 심슈차는 마바 소소소소마 샘 좀도야지 그 당에 가끔 줘서 말해서 가끔 용구 말해서 삼사시오라 샘신도 마와니네 오늘 그래 데샘 shum바니도 단도 샘 심슈차야 샘마 심슈차 당에 가게 된 망보 용구도 메카시 또는 멘리도 당에 가게 용사 말해서 소소소소마 매탄 샘마 무네데结果 삼사 내가结果 삼사 심슈맹게 차도네 그게 줘서 말해서 용사 말해서 소소소소를 매버시기도 하대 도슈에도 레르나네 당일에 매벨레 로세데 내 그게 좀 말해서나 소소소소가 매르던 거라 길에 도요 마땅에 그게 좀 말해서 지대다 최가리네서 요르다 지대 레가르지 당에 그게 좀 말해서는 심슈차네 그게 지금 말하고 저 말아 근데 그 야르도에 그 말 뚜르뚜르라 엉에 중국의 지체고로 마도 다가 대교 말을 삼는 그 지체로라 배조이나 야로라 기회 저와이나 때를 땅에 개가 용주 모두 삼교 말했어라 심슈 마트베셔라 당일에 예배 소소소소래 nhập 지치고라 딜레도 용 레르나는 두슈데라 소소소소랴 땅에 개가 용 말을 삼사잖아 매워게 요 말아 가리오나 강가 찍배도 용구 말아 산제네시 강가도 용구 말아 소소제네 제 용구로 심슈야 깨우라 단데 누가 죽었으나 소소 말을 전도 다 들려잖아 야부치고 삼사 심슈야 쳐를 당구라 어디가 저 갈소라 lungpa tuwa ra chiyon de wadi nye namjina she tayo kunzu she chayi jire. Lungpa tuwa ra chiyon de sa ane bai simshu chana ane tanti ma sung sam te drama driba te she chi samla tan tegra sim muk degra. Ta ko char re chung char su sa ta kar chaga se maung ba da samla tan gura. Ti nga zu nye ma nye she chayi jire. Tawarambu che nye ma Nyeto ngabja sanje nyangale dene lo nyeto ngabja ko chiche se jagal pe ra. Ngo tidu san sanskrit nensi de se te nangbe te senal pe re. Nge she sayo chiri samge. O te pe ne ene kozo tiripati chi ngazu shima yuwa re peke. Uba dewa chi se ngazu labdra liya nyamdo lega chi pe keba shambu re. O kuni nye nangbe te senal sanskrit nensi de puru pe sa rawa. Kundi tenti shiyu te che ne. Kundi pepe titu tu trobo shida yora kame nangdu sanpe nangsa shibichi nangira. Chima tine lo kashesh mato chiyo mara. Tanang pape jimne tsu lungpa kanga shoche peche pera, rubichi che pera. O tipe diyan konzo jaga dogo yora tuwa. Ta kariche wana sam konzo samde chung sikdo. Kame kande shura ngema nashi pe trobo che ti shuya yo mara. Ta pe lungpa shoche tugu shibichi pera. Peka jaga dhudi karicho san simde chus. Peka dhudi ngema da chigwa reche. Keche shetan kame sungda da kanga. Konzo hala saro. Keke njua chi mendo san. Tonga namju da kanga ngema nashi. Kaya dhuru kemu kete mato. Tabe simshu chaya reche kora. O tinde chi mendo sikdo. O tiso di kura. Tupu chunga de chung sarara. Ta tupu chung sam tishe samudane ti ma sim mungdu ra. Shenda chiju tengi koro marwa nga zoda chende tukura chonsa taka chonsa tanti maso san tisha chija soso soso sembre nal tsuji tegra. Ti chonsara de chonsara ta karche gasa mao bade samlutan kugara. Sa ti chonsara de shechi samlutana tunga she samlutana samlu korto marwa. Ti nasha ngarazo sangma chikbarwa. Soso tuwara chi chona tuwa chonso sam tisha samlutana merwa. Ta chonsara ta karche gasa tabshi karche endos ti samlutan ura. Loya nyingdu ya chirrachi dhawa mato pe shumdwa ya mara. O tizi shikda. Semne shindu mawa nye se simshu pa nye bartan se. Ti ngabshu badara semne shindu mawa nye ne sem shumba yinba yidu tendo. Sem shumde kage chotan jiden shawa kala nge kage yung mara samsa semde. O tizi kyo ya.
Mm. So then next we have in the second half of verse, or no, sorry, the first half of verse 430 is it is taught that the state of extreme mental dejection is mental depression. So here, this kind of extreme mental dejection, where we have this thought, I mean, say something inauspicious or sort of something not right happens, and we think like, oh, I can't do anything, nothing good is going to come about with for me. We have a little bit of difficulty and begin disparaging ourselves, criticizing yourselves. This is something that is really one of the worst forms of laziness when it comes to either trying to accomplish something that is worldly or spiritual, whatever it might be. If you have that kind of attitude, there's no way that you will be able to do anything. When you sort of remain in that state of like darkness, of kind of delusion, thinking like, oh, all this bad thing happened, or this isn't right, and so forth, then there's no way to improve at all. But if you have a kind of mental strength, mental fortitude that thinks, well, I'm going to make an effort at this, whether it's like gaining wealth or whether it's developing spiritual qualities, one has to have that kind of spirit of wanting to try, wanting to make an effort. If we get into this kind of laziness, and this is why it is called the worst kind of laziness of self-disparagement, we preclude ourselves from being able to improve or being able to do anything that is good. So we need to have some confidence in ourselves, some belief in our own abilities, and really a kind of mental strength, thinking like, oh, I can do good things. If something bad happens to us and we just stay there thinking like, oh, this is so bad, this bad thing happened, and we get really we get really dejected or sort of depressed about it, then there's no way that we can remove ourselves from that situation, that we can improve what is happening at all. But if we have this sense of, okay, well, this bad thing happened, but now what? What am I going to do in the future? And have that kind of confidence, then that's really the way in which we can handle whatever comes our way. So I think I've told this story before, but there is an example from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who had gone to India 2,500 years after the passing of the Buddha, and met with some various scholars in India, including a great sort of Sanskrit scholar. And when he met the Dalai Lama, he was so, impressed, when one could say, by his sort of happiness, his lightheartedness, his very cheery disposition. And so, several years later, when His Holiness had to escape Tibet and came back to India, the same scholar went to meet him and thought, like, oh, I wonder what he's going to be like now. He's lost his country, he's in this very difficult situation, and sort of had this concern upon going to meet him as what he would be like then after all of this kind of tragedy. And he was amazed to find that His Holiness was exactly the same, right? He had the same sort of cheery disposition, his affect, he was smiling and laughing and so forth. And it's not as though he doesn't acknowledge the bad that had happened, but you can't remain in that kind of state of thinking, oh, this bad thing happened, and just be really dejected and depressed about it. But rather, we acknowledge that there's a bad situation, and then we think, well, what can we do to get out of this? What do I do for the future? And so we need to create in ourselves, when bad things happen, the ability to really think about our own capabilities and what we can do to get past that situation. We need to create a kind of mental fortitude rather than giving in to this kind of extreme mental dejection.
뭐야, 보시면 그러나 뭐야, 다들 이제
Debala Dumba.
뭐야, 다들아, 너도 연대 나타라, 是吧? 너
Dare.
연대 나타라, 너가 전도 내려와 예사, 너도 연대 나타라, 서두라, 개가시고래서나, 나시바, 더발은 듬바시도, 더발은 듬바. debe yende sute tiru reshala soba tesulia chapa asigoran dimba aseresa de tin sere dimba o tika sira de yende ngata las sute tiru reshala soba yende ngata tesulia deba tondo nyewa nyeso tesula shenje chane de nyeche tapsi che tesula asidwa o de ngapchu ngachi padresa deba lan dimba nese deba lan dimba skasiren de ngatilia any chane ki yongye tondwa benjo yongye tondwa tepsi shede dimbanen dewe yonde ngatola deba tondo nyewa ni to sa ya tichilana.
So then next we have longing for the desirable is yearning for experiences of the five sensory objects. So here, this is really, yearning or longing for those kinds of desirable objects, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so forth, striving for those based upon being attached to or kind of clinging to the objects of the five senses, making an effort to get those, whether it's wealth or other kinds of things that we have an attachment to. This is then the 51st of these 57. So longing for the desirable is yearning for experiences of the five sensory objects. And this comes in the last half of verse 430.
뭐야 안되지래 다들 그 알려 소스나 저번에 좀 버텨 뒤서서라 다 대셔야 간다 내심 다다 저다 제사 쇼라 뒤숨 좀 봐서 아니 독배셔라 내배심 주kulene 중앙에서 어디 다들 갈 수도 있으나 너제 너봐 어디 먹으셔 저도 오면 나중 많이 받으려도 내심 내 다다 다게 저골라 소소다 소소도 년제도 소리서라 타니 저보다 다게 다 숨쉬 소소 저거 년제야 가르치나 아니 다게 저거다 다게 메가서 자숨치 어때서야 아니 다를 너가 제소 제도 제반 교로세 다게 저도서야 내가 제소 내가 제거를 단다 지거를 마음발을 지거를 삼 뭐가세 내가 소소 메가서 자도서야 그 편도식도 로바식도 나의 로바시에서 단다 로바식도 마음발을 로바식을 삼 심메가 쳐요라 근데 재미로 세던다도 이번 내심 내심시 가는 내심시고라시나 내심내 다게 쪼보다 다게 자에 쳐라 뒤숨도서 나는 대베트나 로바치에서 단다 지금도 마음 발라 지그래서 나졸이야 난 대베트나 내바치에 단다 지금도 마음 발라 지그래서 안심 추도라 뒤숨도 다게 녀라 소발라 내바치에도 제반 요로 냠도 또배 왕게 달라페 도소 도바 요로 냠도 네 샤라 네버 셈베 주쿠레 중앙에 넣었어 주쿠도와 알야 네만의 그 내가 제스다 다시 마음발지 아주 가사도 줄야 네마 데베툴레 그 전체를 단단 내가 제기도 마음발 내가 제스 나도 메가서도 그 요거 로바치기도 미마 로바치 단다 로바치 마음발 로바치 그래서 근데 섬을 다는 셈메가 저기다 어떤데 셈메로서 야 누나도 나중 아니 봐대 내심 같은 말로는 되면 야 어떻게 주시나
So then next we have in verse 431, harmful intent arises from 9 causes. It is the intent to harm others on the part of one who is concerned about some misfortune in the 3 times with regard to oneself, one's friends, or one's enemies. So here, harmful intent is the 52nd of these 57 faults. And so here we have then these 3 kind of categories of you, your friends, those that you love, and those that are your enemies. And there is, with respect to then the 3 times, the thought of like, oh, well, I was harmed, I'm being harmed, I will be harmed, or my friends were harmed, are being harmed, will be harmed, or my enemies were benefited, are being benefited, or will be benefited. And that causes us to be unhappy, right? So we have those 3 kind of categories of beings, and the 3 times, what has happened in the past, what is happening in the present, and what will happen in the future. And our minds get disturbed by that, right? If those that, like myself, is harmed, or was harmed, or will be harmed, or as well as those that I like, those that I consider to be my friends on my side, and they were harmed, are being harmed, or will be harmed in the future, as well as the ones that I don't like those beings that are considered my enemies. If they are benefited, were benefited by someone, or will be benefited, these kinds of situations cause us to become unhappy. They disturb our mind, and out of that sort of mental disturbance comes this harmful intent towards others. So we don't like it, or we have this kind of unhappiness that then fuels into our harmful intent.
뭐야 다 lö심 지시를 레들와 강이 되는 목바오 시도와 어디 가르치는 것 중에 손바닥에 lö심 지베시를 레들와래 제메드바 강이 받네 목바오시 어디 가르치도서나 lö심 지시를 르다심 이거 집으로 찾아는 길랑이 붙여줘라 지시 레들와서 내가 제고야 강가야 레들와 강이 되는 목바오시 근데 이 목대 목바셔 시원하죠 목바셔 이 목바 들려야 아니 그 당가 중에 손바닥 Lusimchi Vesir, Le, Delwale, Che Medeva Kanye Batani Muba, Le Lo Chashere Zeto, Mukwa Sete. What is Lana?
So then we have in the first half of verse 432, dullness is a state of inactivity due to physical and mental heaviness. Here, when the sort of mind and body are heavy with this kind of dullness, then one doesn't engage in various activities. Whatever it is that one might want to do, you're not going to do due to this kind of physical and mental heaviness. So here, this is considered to be a part of laziness, this kind of state of dullness.
Roya, ta Ni Zeto. Ni said to what's our Timato Kimdo. Ni Kuba Ni Satibre. Ta Ngapchunga Shibadra. Ni is a Jushi to Yula, Jupara Meba, Chitose. Ni de Karchuasne, Jushi to Mika Shibana, Shibane, Shiba, Lugi, Shiba, Shiba, or Namshi Tautu, Yulia, and then Jubala Rameba Chivara, Yula Jukumarwa. By Yi Shiba, Milam the Tati, Mato, Yungan and Namjutoya, Jambata in the Mevshagara. Jushi to Yula Juba, Juya Mevchako Tushagara. Miga Tona and Nikuyo Marwa. Rexati Regi and Nikuyo Marwa. Miki Shiba Yusu Tunguma Tati Ro Recha Ganga Tunguyo Mara. Yi Shiba de Chunam Juton Nikune. Ni Tabunda Kuna Melam Tangra, Ni Tubukuna Melata Yomara. Oh, this is all. Shiba Ni this Ni Kuete. Jushi to Yula Juba Rama Bachavas. You need a Chakaras, Yula Juba Shiba Trubute, Yula Jumuchu Rameba, Juchu Maresivara. Janini Kura, Mato, Jushi Yula Junani Kuyomara. Oh, Jiba. Anything up to Hanga but the red one, your mother. Oh, Kavalesa. Napchunga Shiba, Ni de. Jushi to you, Ramaba Chetani, Mambo Kawashena. Anything is a convert, Lelo Taba, Shota Judaniga Legacy Marwa. Nilakada, Kashani, Kaduna, Nini, Kawachido. Oh, Tine, Sopun Yoptosha. Legacy, Chundrita, Judan Lega the Kanga. Yabuchim to get her. Oh, Tisha. Yeah, Tisha.
So then here, so that was the 53rd, and then the 54th is sleep. So here, drowsiness is a sleepiness. So here, this is really not just being sleepy, but being in that state of sleep. The root verse itself is quite terse. It uses the same word, saying sort of sleep is sleep. And this is a state in which all of our six consciousnesses are sort of withdrawn such that they don't have the faculty of engaging with objects. So here, when we are asleep, none of our various consciousnesses, our visual consciousness, our auditory consciousness, our olfactory consciousness, gustatory consciousness, or bodily consciousness, even our mental consciousness doesn't engage in the same kinds of objects as it normally would. We can have a sort of dreaming mind, but that's a little bit different. If we are seeing something, we are not sleeping, right? Or if our body is actually feeling something, we are not sleeping. And although it is the case that when we sleep, and if we're in a sort of lighter sleep, we might have dreams. When we are in a very heavy sleep, we don't even have dreams. So here, if one is engaging in objects, you have to be awake. But when you are in this state of sleep, all of those kinds of consciousnesses are withdrawn from their normal objects. And if you like to sleep a lot, this can contribute to a kind of laziness. It acts as an obstacle to being able to have joyous effort, sort of zeal in our practice, as well as it's an obstacle to developing meditative stabilization. But if you're really into sleeping and you're just kind of constantly in this sort of stupor of sleep, even worldly activities you won't be successful with. So sleep is a kind of sluggishness or laziness, and this is why it is referred to as a fault here.
다돈다고 니녀들 배가부치 때에는 개와투에다 대수 강가대 야구 용병 말아 뒤천에 방치시도 어디디 버쳐 다 그반에 있어야 돼 그반에 그반에 아니 르심 잡도 마시와 와세 그바데라 다디 가라 생각 중 안가 받으래도 나중 안가 봐 그반에 세게 잡에 르심 잡도 마시와 와세 칼라라 소바틴데 망보스 사 요아 아니 녀도 와차 아니 담에다 삼르신다데 윤담에다 가스칼이야 그 띵지 고미올라 소바테줄 견치가라 신다 가스칼 가지마스 터도가라 그바네 르심 잡도 마시와 와세 그바데 셈시와 띵지 고미에다 계획 자와 투벨은 견치가라 가지마주 신다 셈 가스칼 터도가라 뭐지인데 나중 나가 받으래 그바네 세지 작베 르심 rabdo mashivasu kala mambo sene ko ba mambo yo tingi de komya de tinderia nyopto chane yungu mardo shenda tindelo sam ko do gurese o di bangurese tinderesha ya tishkuna
So, if you really enjoy sleeping and sleep a lot, this is really an obstacle to engaging in virtue. It's an obstacle to developing meditative stabilization. And so this is why it's listed as one of these faults that is to be abandoned. And then next is restlessness. This is the same word as we sometimes use it as like agitation or excitement in the context of developing meditative concentration. And here, this can come about due to a variety of factors, including like overeating. So here, restlessness is a lack of physical and mental tranquility. So this is something that is said to be a fault to developing meditative concentration as well as to engaging in virtues. If you're sort of restless and the mind is going all over the place, then one won't focus on doing virtuous activities or be able to engage in meditative concentration, meditative stabilization. So restlessness it can come about through like eating too much food, and the body and mind become lacking a kind of tranquility that is good for developing a good practice, engaging in virtue, engaging in meditative stabilization, and so forth. So that's the 55th of these.
oh yeah dan geba se de to geba never chebe just so chawa member che ni ma chi ma de ba chene geba che shora ta tin de ma so sam sim che sho te geba member che ba geba asires chi tongwa le so ane te de ma so sa ane che ma ko sim de ma bo che gora ta nge te no du sim bo che so de ma so sa sim de shi chi che ta na se gora o de ka shi res nga tu ba nga ju nga tu ba geba ne chawa member che ba la geba chi tongwa le so 티 자원 멤버십을 개발케는 선미지 버차라 선대쇼 선례 동에 미지 버쇼 어 티초에나네 땡이지 고멜라 소바케 와투엘이야 네버시거라 어 티천의 쉐도 개발 멤버 개발시 장도 멤버시엘은 저스 자원 멤버십을 멤버십 마디 버시거든 개발케 시동화래서 멤버십을 되게 치네 심반매 집에 동해 망보 용거라 그 심반매 집에 동해 양겨라 때때 마소사 제 납중가 쭉 받으신 저반에 저왕에 받쳐봐란 저바 시 동안에 좀 아니 심대셔지 제다네 개와도 발라 파르셔시그라 제 심대셔 대셔시 성을다되네 개와도에다 대설 파르셔시고라 티 빵고레스 티마바나 티와게네 개와도 발라 껴시그레스 규이전에 봐 가베선도 지다 야 어떻게
Mm. So then next, 56th is regret. So here, regret is to lament one's negative activities. It arises from agonizing about them later. So having this thought of like we've done something and like, oh, that's not okay, and to continue to ruminate about that, to think about it again and again, like, oh, that was such a big mistake. Oh, I really shouldn't have done that, and so forth. That kind of regret or sort of rumination on it makes us worry and suffer and be unhappy, right? It creates a kind of agonizing over those things that we have done. And so if we have this kind of experience wherein we regret something that was negative that we've done and later, again, sort of just agonize over it, this creates a lot of worry and it becomes an impediment, an obstacle to our doing virtuous actions. Rather than making our efforts at virtue, we are just sort of caught up worrying about that thing that we did in the past, like, oh, that wasn't good. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, that was such a mistake. So here, this is the 56th of these, which is regret in the sense of agonizing over one's past activities.
뭐야, 그 말해서 뭐래. 대단 군조 숨소라 서도 덴바시다 군조 숨을 소발라 서도 네 그래서 로남예네 태소마서 군조 숨데 덴바인다 마이 섬로 덴바시시야 또다 간데이나 섬 군조 숨산제 주 군조 주 근데 군조라 소바 덴바인나 마이 섬 어떤데 태좀사야 될 수도 대단 군조 숨소라 로남예네 태소마 로남예 이나마이 배시메 이마멘도 배시 예수 태좀을 숨용고 봐 찬양배 태좀서 뜬줄기 태좀 뜨메주기 태좀 숨용거라 군조디 템바 이나마나 섬 찬양배치니 찬양배 태좀서라 군조 숨 배치 템바 인지레 섬나 뜬다고네 돌파 줄기여라 배 타시오 말 뜬주태서 배치 템바 인지 말에 섬나 뜨메주기 태좀서라 뜬마이 배sol파 줄도여라 되시거라 템바다 군조 숨다 렌데라 소발로 로 남바니니 나좀바 태좀 오셔라 태좀 세시 용도도 태좀 세다 된다 군조 숨소라 로 남바니 태좀 남바니 세다 어디래 어디래 같은다 템바다 군조 숨다 렌데라 소발로 요나 메나 삼코 예발로 이치네 세다 태좀 사대나 아티고 가서래 방사를 되어라. 뭐 어찌시구나 야.
So
뭐야.
then the 57th comes here in the second half of 433, where it says, doubt is to be of two minds about the four truths of the Aryas, the three jewels, and so on. So here, this kind of a split mind, doubt is something where it says, is it this or is it not? Is this true? Is this not? Like with particularly here with respect to the four truths of the Aryas or the three jewels and so forth, one can have different kinds of doubt about them. They're generally said to be three kinds of doubt. We could have a sort of equal doubt where we think, well, maybe they're true, maybe they're not true. Or there could be doubt tending towards the factual, tending towards what is actually true, and the doubt that tends towards the counterfactual or that which is not true. So here, if you think oh, the three jewels probably are a real source of refuge, that would be doubt tending towards the factual. Or if you think that, oh, you know, the four truths probably aren't accurate, that's probably not true, then that would be doubt tending towards the non-factual. So here, to have this kind of a split mind, the mind in these like two minds about something, if you remain in that state without having say confidence in the four noble truths or in the three jewels, then this is an impediment to one's practice. So having that kind of doubt then is something to be abandoned.
뭐야. 어떤 아주 맵든지 시사르다. 맵든 못해. 제 가르쳐도시나. 맵든 저대 못해다. 내 폐지 빵자 있을 참아 빵자 빵구를 시켜라. 다이나 이거 시도상 같이 심중 외성화 참마도 매부터 도 심중 신경서 그래서 야 방자 인마에 따야돼 방자 유지배 전에다 야야는 내부 인배 전에다 어떤데 삼을단에 셰고 그래서도 전부 대단한 배지 방자 인라서 같이 심중 의성을 나 심중 거랑 의성의 샤샤부터 된도세 어딜 따져셔서 나야 니베 주다 야나 심중데 방자데 요나 교티레스 교티 요나데 용거리 방고레스 했던다다 야나로한 대부분 의성하잖아 교티 방고레스 했던데 거고레스 했도와 야 된디무시 어디스도나
So then those are the 57 of these faults. And these are generally distinguished by being 57 things that one is to be, one is to abandon. Now, sometimes it would appear as though it's merely identifying a particular mental factor. However, this is explained in such a way as it sort of explains the cause of the fault as well as the sort of faulty results that come from that. So investigating in that way, one should make an effort to abandon these. So here, it really is getting into how not just merely identifying those kinds of mental factors, but how they are faulty in the sense of causing various faults and what are the kinds of results that come from that. And so that's how this has been explained.
뭐야 다 싸워르다 그다 전주 선배 방사 권도 셰베 나중 앞에 배터도 참아 전주 선배 저거 방고를 해서 동전 남게 라바리 하서 전주 선배 김바이나 때서 방고를 해서 네 동바 연계게 rab도 중앙 전주 선배도 텔레자 라바도 방고를 해서 그러와 나르셰베 니바트다 김배 전주 선배가 방버리자 자와다 전주 선배 rab도 중앙 동전 남게 라바도야 그때서 봐야 보세 방고를 해서 그러와 야 뜻이구나
So then going back to the root text, and this is secondly sort of presenting a summary of the meaning, and this comes then in the first half of verse 434. A bodhisattva should forsake these faults. One with monastic precepts must forsake even more. So here, as was explained, these previously explained faults are explained both for those bodhisattvas who are householders as well as those who are ordained. And so these are things that are to be abandoned by householder bodhisattvas, and even more so with more sort of effort by those who are ordained.
뭐야 당아서 네 가르치기도 쓰나 그발래서 이봐 연대 랑발라 라바서도 단다타케 나중갑데 방고를 시에사라 다 연대데데 랑고레서 연대 랑발라 이봐 연대 랑발라 니세 내갑지 연대데데 랑고레서 터도지 연대데 토발라 랑고레서 니세도 다 당보들 실탄바다 내가래 사주 남샤 시에도 연대지단 시 아니 사주 대바침보 남래 수변에 사주 전에 산에 고마토고라 어디 남자 시에도 또 당불라 시에서 질담받더라 연대경어 뒤뒤 땜바다 소소ngo 뭐서와다 소소 대부다 투무진 대부스다 섭제하셔도 반전이고라 다 당부들다 당부 가르치고 그러잖아 질담바 연대 저다 뒤뒤 땜바다 뒤뒤 땜바다 다 연대에서 간가 뒤뒤 땜게 당부들 다 예바 대남 당저와 연대 남라 달라테 단다께 다 이거야 나중 앞에 시작하라 예바 대남 당저와 연대 남라 달라테 서도다 되게 연대도 졸라 야부지 땡고래 서다 자주 선배 예바 대남 당저나 연대 남라 달라도 템바르 조르에서 콘도셰베 교회에서 바나 때도서지 연대도서 강가되니 달라도 토바용 그래서라 예바파시 연대 템바르 자오스 교회 담마즈 바 때도서 연대도서 네 땡고래서 Tishigoto, Ya Tishkuna.
So then next, we turn to the second topic, which is adopting qualities, good qualities. And this is broken down into various subheadings, including first the sort of temporary qualities and then ultimate good qualities. And so first, these temporary good qualities are divided into a kind of general teaching, and then it gets into the good qualities of the 10 grounds, how one progresses through those 10 bodhisattva grounds. Now, first, the general teaching gives a brief description of the entities of good qualities and then identifying the individual entities of good qualities as well as their individual effects, the results that come from them, and then the general effects. So here, to begin with, we have then a brief teaching or description of the entities of good qualities, which comes then in the second half of verse 434, where it says, when one is freed of these faults, one can easily develop positive qualities. So these 57 faults are to be abandoned, and by abandoning those 57, one will be able to easily develop positive qualities. So here it's really an exhortation to make an effort at abandoning those faults, and if one is free of those faults, one will be able to easily sort of depend on or develop these good qualities.
Oh, yeah. Those are those Tambo Yende duty tempers at the door. Yende duty tempers. That the correction. Never tenam tang treva yende namla tala tense. Anekare, Chanchu Sembe never tenam da treva. Nas yende namla telado. Juban Juve never pass yende temper show. This one. Yache. That tell a Chanchu Semba ye. Yenden dorde chawane ta yenden dorte de shayde karesina jinda chutum chundu samden shirap yingji soasa yenden dorde ne tiresa jimba cha chutu cha soba cha chundu cha samden shirap chara ane samden shirap ne yingji chambu soasa risto tikar ya otishkuna Devalo Mogoshan Dura, Tela Chanjus, Yenden Dorto de Tembashi, the Kashina, Chimbachutu Sabasande, La Sopata, Yinjita, and then Te Kune Lambe, Simgiso, that Ninji Kunelane, to meditate Tagasha, teach to Sanja Kubato Wacha, Chanju Sembla Soba. What is it? Thank you, this Dorto Nayade, yeah.
So then, in this brief description of the entities of good qualities, it continues into verse 435, which says, in short, the good qualities that a bodhisattva should develop are generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, wisdom, compassion, and so on. So here, these are in brief the kinds of good qualities that a bodhisattva should develop, and here listing them out: generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, wisdom, and compassion, and so on. And these are then listed out in the commentary to this. And the one last thing to note is that when it says compassion, it refers to the kind of attitude of bodhicitta that is motivated by that compassion. So when we have this kind of compassion for sentient beings observing their suffering and the thought, I will free them from their suffering, one then takes up this attitude of bodhicitta, which is included in these good qualities.
Oh, that never nesa. Never so no so much at the door. Oh, that day less on out there, so. Never so no so. Oh, did it that. Kawata Jodi. Ah, that's simple.
So we've reached the end of our time for today, and Genla is making sure to make a big mark so we can remember where we are going to be picking up there and with identifying the individual entities of the good qualities.
Thank you, Genla. Tuchiche.
뭐야?
And Katrina, please thank Ginla for the beautiful, inspiring motivation at the beginning.
Mm.
And we'll do our best to apply these to our daily lives. And so we'll finish up with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and the spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lovesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Iram Guru Ratna Mandala Kampiryatayami. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Teringi ngondre sungchoche di mixe tukche na shuye yores.
뭐야? 도착을 깜.